Ashiro LaHashem, Ki Gamal Olai. 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 Ani nechaslecha v'tachti, yageni li b'shu'asecha. Ani nechaslecha v'tachti, yageni li b'shu'asecha. Ani nechaslecha v'tachti.
Another pretty song from Rabbi Baruch Chait from his album called Salonika. How's everybody doing? Great to be with you on a Monday night. We got a great daf today. Let's light up the darkness. And who is with us on a Monday night? Excuse me. Stephen in New Hampshire, Pauline in Chicagoland, Sharon in New Jersey, Paul in the Great Northwest, David in Indiana, Kat in California, Melissa in Great Neck. Paula says, Shalom, Elvis. New York is in the house. James in Annapolis, Ruth in Kentucky, Nancy in North Carolina, Leona in Illinois, John in Maine, Carol saying Shalom. Bill from mid-Missouri. Daylight savings time. I think, aren't we coming to the end of daylight savings time? I don't mean in the year, but they're going to do away with it. Wouldn't that be good? Ira is in Greenville, South Carolina. Cecil says, Shalom. Bit by a tick. You were bit by a tick, Renee. May you have a refuah shlema. I know that can really be a hassle. Shandora in the Bronx. Welcome. And Aoife in Florida. Let's get into it. We are in Tractate Yevamos, the 14th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of levirate marriage. We're in chapter 12, talking about the Khalitsa ceremony, which is the alternative mitzvah to a widow and a brother-in-law marrying each other after a man dies childless. Here in Mishna number 3, we're talking about what if certain elements are left out of the Khalitsa ceremony. So the basics, right? The most important thing is that the widow is going to remove the shoe of her brother-in-law. They're declining to perform yibum, levirate marriage. They're doing Khalitsa. So there's going to be a recitation of lines from the Torah, the removal of the shoe from upon his foot, and spitting in his presence. And all these elements optimally need to be performed for the Khalitsa to be valid, for their levirate obligation to each other to be disbanded, and then she can go off and marry whoever she wants. What if she removes the shoe and recites the verses from the Torah but doesn't spit in the presence of the yavam? What if she removes the shoe and spits but doesn't recite the verses? What if she only spits? That's what we were talking about yesterday. And we saw that the idea there would be, well, certainly it would not be a valid chalitza, but would that action have any consequences at all? Answer, yes. Because she performed part of the chalitza ceremony, now yibum is off the table. She can no longer marry that yavam, nor any of his brothers, who are also her yevamim. Why? Why would an action that by itself does not amount to chalitza nevertheless forestall the alternative to chalitza? That's what we were discussing yesterday, and we continue to discuss it today. To help us understand it, the sages were talking about related laws having to do with sacrifices, like if the priestly portion of a sacrificial offering, which the priests eat, but they can only eat it after the other part of the sacrificial offering went to its terminus, meaning that the part that was supposed to be consumed by the altar and go up as a pleasing aroma to God did so, and was sacrificed for the purpose of being a sin offering. And likewise, that some of the blood from the offering was sprinkled on the horns of the altar, as it were. And that was done for the purpose of the correct offering. The priest doing it had the correct intention in mind. He wasn't thinking he was performing some other offering. If both of those things happen, then the other priest can certainly eat the priestly portions of the offering that are designated for them. But if the other two parts don't happen, maybe they can, maybe they can't. If they have to be done, but maybe the intention was wrong, maybe they can, maybe they can't. So these are kind of analogous laws. And then we also looked at Shavuos, where the idea is that there are two main kind of offerings of Shavuos. One is the lambs. There are particular animal offerings that are brought on Shavuos, the holiday that celebrates Matan Torah, the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai. And there are two loaves of wheat bread that are brought as an offering, and then they're distributed to the priests in the Holy Temple, and they eat of them. But they cannot eat of the loaves. The loaves haven't been fully consecrated until the lambs are sacrificed. And what if some portion of the lamb offering was done incorrectly? Then what happens to the loaves of bread? And by analogy, what do we learn from that about a partial Khalitsa ceremony? All right, we pick this up at the bottom of 104b here in chapter 12, discussing the third Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, says, actually the loaves of Shavuos are consecrated only when one slaughters the offerings, the lambs, for their own sake, knowing that you're bringing the Shavuos offering, and sprinkles their blood for their own sake, right? The priest has the intention as he sprinkles the blood that this is the special offering of Shavuos and not the daily offering that was brought every day in the temple, for example. I.e., only if both factors, which are indispensable in rendering the offering valid, were properly performed, only then may the priests eat from the loaves. If so, the teaching sent from Eretz Yisrael seems to be in accordance with Rebbe's opinion that even if only one of the two permitting factors of slaughter and sprinkling was performed, the loaves will still be consecrated. Likewise, with respect to Khalitsa, where there is a need for two permitting factors, not just removing the shoe, but also the spitting and the recitation of verses, spitting and removal of the shoe seem to be indispensable, maybe, no, but performing one factor, such as spitting, which is not enough to make a Khalitsa, we say it is a Khalitsa with spitting and removing the shoe, even if the verses were not read. We saw that in our Mishnah. But, so it seems that, well, you at least need two to make a Khalitsa, a valid Khalitsa. So if you only did the spitting, you don't have a valid Khalitsa, but nevertheless, she's going to be prohibited to now perform Yibum because she's done a partial Khalitsa. She has commenced the Khalitsa procedure, and that takes Yibum, levirate marriage, off the table. The Gemara questions the previous assumption with regard to Rabbi Akiva's opinion on the matter. What does Rabbi Akiva feel about this? Did Rabbi Akiva say that spitting does not disqualify the yevama? Right, so one opinion would be that once she spits, that's it. Yibum is off the table. She can't marry her yavam nor any of his brothers because she has commenced the Khalitsa ceremony. That was at least one opinion. Does Rabbi Akiva agree with it? Did he say that spitting does not disqualify the yevama from a later levirate marriage to one of the other brothers? But isn't it taught in a baraisa? If she removed the shoe, but did not spit, and did not recite the verses, her chalitza is valid. Okay, so it seems that the spitting and the recitation of verses are not indispensable to chalitza. Only removing the shoe is absolutely indispensable. So if she spat, but did not remove the shoe and did not recite the text, her chalitza is disqualified. If she recited the verses, but did not spit or did not remove the shoe, there is no doubt that she has done nothing, and her action has no halachic significance. If it has no halachic significance, that would imply that she can still marry her yavam, because it's like she hasn't commenced the chalitza procedure. So the Gemara clarifies. Who is the author of the Baraisa? Now we're at 105a. If we say it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, could it be that he would hold that if she removed the shoe, but did not spit or did not recite the verses, her chalitza is valid, as stated in the Baraisa? But didn't Rabbi Eliezer say the phrase, so shall it be done, in Deuteronomy 25:9, indicates that any element of the Khalitsa process that constitutes an action is indispensable, and therefore spitting is necessary. Rabbi Eliezer says you got to do all of the steps. You got to remove the shoe and spit and recite the verses, or it's not a Khalitsa. Rather, it is obvious that the Baraisa is not in accordance with Rabbi Eliezer, so therefore it's in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And he teaches at the end of the Baraisa that if she spat, but did not remove the shoe or did not recite the text, her Khalitsa is disqualified. So the Gemara clarifies, to whom is the yevama, the widow, disqualified from marrying after such a Khalitsa? If we say that Rabbi Akiva means to teach us that she is disqualified from marriage to everyone in the world, well, this is unnecessary. It is obvious that spitting alone will not permit her to marry any stranger. She has a levirate bond with her brother-in-law, with the yavam. She can only marry him, which she would do by performing yibum, or she can perform chalitza. Then she can go marry anyone she wants. But until she does a complete and valid chalitza, she can't go marry anyone that she wants. So we know that without a complete chalitza, she is not free to go marry other people. We don't need to be told that. So what is Rabbi Akiva telling us? It is obvious that her chalitza is invalid, as did any chalitza take place in order for her to be permitted to marry some member of the public? Rather, is it not clear that Rabbi Akiva is telling us that she is disqualified from marriage to the other yevamim, her other brothers-in-law, right? She could be performing chalitza with one of them, and then the others would be exempt. She normally doesn't have to perform chalitza with each of the brothers. But until she's performed chalitza with one of them, she is free to marry any of the surviving brothers of her deceased husband. So learn from here that Rabbi Akiva also thinks that spitting alone does disqualify her from marriage to the brothers. That just the act of spitting as part of a chalitza ceremony, it's not like she just the fact that she spat while she was walking down the street disqualifies her from marrying one of the brothers-in-law. But rather, if she started a chalitza ceremony by spitting in the presence of one of them, so now she can't marry any of them. She has to finish the chalitza, and then she could go marry a member of the public. And that is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. And the Gemara asks, but according to Rabbi Akiva's understanding, that only an action performed on the body of the yavam is indispensable for chalitza. Recall that Rabbi Akiva said the reason that removing the shoe but not spitting still is a valid chalitza. A recitation of the verses, I'm not sure what he said, but let's say that there was recitation of the verse and removing the shoe but not spitting. So Rabbi Akiva said it's a valid chalitza. Why? Because the verse says, so shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And spitting in front of him is not something she does to him, like removing the shoe. Reciting the verse is a little unclear. Maybe that's also not to him. Right? So according to Rabbi Akiva's understanding, that only an action performed on the body of the yavam is indispensable for chalitza. So what is different about spitting and what is different about the recitation of verses? Both are not indispensable. So why is it that if she spat but did not remove the shoe, she is disqualified from marriage to the brothers? Yet, if she recited the text but did not remove the shoe, her act has no halakhic significance, no legal significance, and she still can marry the brothers. Right? If we're saying that by opening the chalitza ceremony, she didn't complete it by removing the shoe, but by starting it by doing the spitting, now we take yibum off the table, she can no longer marry her brother-in-law. Well, what if she started the chalitza ceremony by reciting the text from the Torah? That's part of the chalitza ceremony. Shouldn't that also disqualify her from marrying her brother-in-law? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Akiva finds a reason to rabbinically prohibit the woman after spitting, yet holds that the reason is not valid, does not apply if she just recited the text alone. The recitation of the verses from the Torah, which takes place both at the beginning of the chalitza process, before the removal of the shoe, and at the end of the chalitza process, will not cause him to be confused about a proper chalitza. as one who witnesses her recitation of the verses, knows that she might have only recited the text but has not yet removed the shoe. And therefore, it will cause no harm to invalidate her chalitza and continue to permit her in levirate marriage, yibum, to her brothers-in-law. But with regard to spitting, which does not take place at the beginning, the normal order of chalitza is that she reads a verse from the Torah, she removes the brother-in-law's shoe, she spits in his presence, and then she reads a verse from the Torah again. So, if somebody, since that's the normal order, if somebody witnesses her spitting, they're going to assume that she already removed the shoe. And if we allowed her, because she only spit, to go and marry her yavam, somebody would say, well, wait a minute, she performed chalitza, and now she's marrying the brother-in-law. Must be that the sages have enacted some kind of a decree to annul chalitza. Now we don't need chalitza anymore, because she can marry her brother-in-law even after performing chalitza. To avoid a member of the public, somebody witnessing this ceremony, from making such a mistake, Rabbi Kiva is going to say, once she spits, everyone's going to assume she's already removed the shoe, therefore, that's it, she can no longer marry the brother-in-law. But if all they witness her doing is reciting the verse, they wouldn't know whether it was the beginning or the end of the Khalitsa ceremony, so they wouldn't make an assumption that she's already removed the shoe. And there are those who say that this is what they sent to Shmuel's father, who was rendering an opinion about this yesterday and the day before. A yevama, right, the widow, who spat before removing the shoe, shall remove the shoe, and she is not required to spit another time. She's supposed to remove the shoe and then spit. But if she spit and then removed the shoe, kind of changing the order of the Khalitsa ceremony, this is not going to invalidate the Khalitsa ceremony, and she doesn't have to spit again. Why? But say, since the proper order is that she removes the shoe and then spits, she jumped the gun, she spit first, why not have her, after she removes the shoe, spit again, so that things were done in the correct order? This is like the incident where a certain woman came before Rabbi Ami for Khalitsa, and Rabbi Abba Bar Memel sat before him at the time, and she spat before she removed the shoe. So Rabbi Ami said to him, Rabbi Abba, tell her to remove the shoe of the yavam, so that we may dismiss her case from the court, as she does not require another act of spitting. So Rabbi Abba said to him, but for Khalitsa we need her to spit. And Rabbi Ami answered, but she already spat. So Rabbi Abba said, but that spitting was done before the removal. We want it to be done after the removal, so let her spit again. And what would be the problem with that? And Rabbi Ami answered him, a disaster could be brought out from it. As if you say she should spit again, there will be others who say the first spitting has no halakhic significance and she is still permitted to the brothers if no spitting was performed subsequently. And they will come to permit a bona fide chalutza, a woman who really has performed chalitza, to the brothers, assuming that she is permitted, because when they see her spitting the first time, they will say that she certainly had already removed the shoe beforehand. Right? It creates an appearance of impropriety. So he challenged again. But we require that chalitza be performed in the proper order, as recorded in the Torah. So the other sage answered him, the proper order is not indispensable. We prefer the proper order, but if we do it out of order, it's still a valid chalitza. Rabbi Abba Bar Memel taught, he is merely pushing off my legitimate questions with far-fetched attempts to justify his statements that are not well-founded. Afterward, he went out from the house of study and examined the matter, and he discovered that things were as Rabbi Ami said. Rabbi Ami was right. Rabbi Abba should have respected him. As it is taught in a baraisa, whether the removal of the shoe preceded the spitting as the proper order requires, or whether the spitting preceded the removal of the shoe, what he did is done, i.e. it is effective, and the woman is therefore permitted to marry a member of the public. Apropos adherence to instructions given in the Torah, the Gemara relates an incident. Levi went out to the villages to teach people Torah. They asked him several questions. Firstly, what is the law for an armless woman? May she perform chalitza with her teeth? Now, Levi, right, who's accustomed to learning Torah with the major sages, I'm not sure where his city of dwelling and study was. Maybe it was in Pumbedisa. Maybe it was in Nehardea, or maybe he was in Israel and he was learning, at Yavne or Tiberia in one of the major learning centers. But the concept here is that, well, he went out to the sticks, right? And you would expect that the people out there are not very learned, and they would ask him really basic questions that would be easy for him to answer. Au contraire, he went out to the sticks and he found out the people were very sophisticated and they had very challenging questions for him. So the first of these questions was, it says, right, in Khalitsa, that the woman will remove the shoe from upon his foot. What if she has no hands? Can she perform Khalitsa? What if she even has no arms? May she perform Khalitsa with her teeth? She would still be removing the shoe. Secondly, what is the law if a yevama, if the widow, spat blood instead of saliva? Is the Khalitsa valid? And lastly, they asked Levi with regard to the verse from Daniel 10:21, but I will declare to you that which is inscribed in the writing of truth. If by inference there is writing in heaven that is not truth. Right? They're referring to a line in the book of Daniel where Daniel has been praying for inspiration because he needs to answer these questions of the king, I guess the Babylonian king, or maybe by then it's the Persian king. And inspiration finally comes to him, and he's kind of flabbergasted. It's amazing, like this man comes to him who's not a man, who's an angel, and says, don't worry, don't be afraid. I'm going to give you prophecy that you're going to need in order to reveal to the Persian kings what will be in the future. And as part of Daniel being granted this prophecy, the angel says, I will speak to you from the book of truth. So the people of the villages are now asking the sage Levi, why does it say that? Why would an angel say, I will speak to you from the book of truth? Do angels ever lie? Do they ever reveal things that are not from the book of truth? So Levi did not have an answer at hand to these questions. What did he do? He ran back to the house of study and asked his own teachers, what are the answers to these questions? And they said to him, in response to the first question, does it say in the Torah, and she shall remove the shoe by hand? Clearly she may remove the shoe in any manner, and there's no reason to disqualify an armless woman. She can remove the shoe with her teeth? Wonderful. With regard to the second question, they said, and does it say in the Torah, and she shall spit saliva? It merely says, and she shall spit, indicating that even if blood emerges from her mouth, the chalitzah is valid. Now, with regard to the verse cited in their third question, but I will declare to you that which is inscribed in the writing of truth, about which you ask, but is there any writing in heaven that is not truth? This is not difficult, la kasha. Here, i.e., a writing of truth, refers to a sentence of judgment accompanied by an oath. Now, do angels make sentences of judgment? No, they just deliver the news. God passes judgment. So when God judges somebody, when God passes a judgment, when God issues a decree with regard to some human's destiny, is that forever? Is that unchangeable? Can God's mind be changed, as it were? Well, the sages here are saying, once God issues a judgment, if it's accompanied by an oath, then it will never change. But if it's not accompanied by an oath, then, with maybe making an atonement or praying for forgiveness or making sacrifices or offering up good deeds or charitable contributions or something like that, maybe you can change God's mind. Maybe you can change the decree. So this is called a writing of truth. A writing of truth is one accompanied by an oath where God says, I swear this is what will happen. God never needs to swear. But if God does swear, and you see that in some places in the Bible where it says, God, I swear to you, says to a prophet to say to a human, by my word, or I swear that it shall be such and such, that's a decree that's not going to be changed. That is what's called a writing of truth. So there, i.e. the inferred untruthful writing, this refers to a sentence of judgment that is not accompanied by an oath, as it could be canceled if conditions change. I already said a bracha on this. So this is in accordance with the words of Rav Shmuel bar Ami. As Rav Shmuel bar Ami said, that Rabbi Yosei said, from where is it derived that a sentence of judgment accompanied by an oath cannot be torn up? It is as it is stated. Therefore, this is 1 Samuel 3:14. Therefore, I have sworn unto the house of Eli, or Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for with sacrifice nor offering forever. God was really angry with Eli, with Eli's house, right? Eli was the Kohen Gadol. He was the high priest. He was a good man. His sons were selling indulgences, as it were. They were selling, they were making money. They were corrupt. They were making money off people bringing their offerings to the tabernacle. The house, the temple had not been built yet, right? Because this is Samuel. In the book of Samuel, this is actually about the birth of Samuel. This is the precursor to the story of Samuel, when Hannah goes and sees Eli, and then later we learn that Eli's sons are corrupt. And so God becomes so angry that priests are acting in this corrupt manner that God says, I swear to the house of Eli, you're going to be cursed. What's the curse? That the sons will always die young in the descendants of Eli, the high priest. Now, because God accompanied that with this oath, I swear to the house of Eli, which indicates that due to the accompanying oath, the sentence of judgment cannot ever be rescinded, even if offerings of atonement are brought. Now, apropos this verse, the Gemara mentions that Rabbah said, with regard to this verse about the curse on the house of Eli, with sacrifice and offering, one from the house of Eli will not be atoned for. But he may gain atonement through words of Torah study, right? So somebody who was born into that household, like he didn't do anything wrong, but there's a curse on the house that all the men are going to die young in that family. So bringing offerings to atone for the past deeds of their ancestors will not help. But in any particular generation, a young man of that household who engages in Torah study can live a longer time. Abaye said, through sacrifice and offering, he may not achieve atonement, but he may gain atonement through acts of kindness. And the Gemara relates that Rabbah and Abaye themselves were descendants of the house of Eli. Rabbah, who immersed himself primarily in Torah study, lived to be 40. Most of the people in that family, the men, died shortly after marriage at about 18 years of age. So it's not that Rabbah had such a long life, but at least he lived to be 40, twice the normal lifespan of that short-lived family. But Abaye, also a member of that family, who immersed himself both in Torah and acts of kindness, lived 60 years. So they both lived longer lives than usual for descendants of the house of Eli due to their actions, right? No guarantees, but if you want to optimize your chances to live a long life, add Torah study and good deeds to your routine. So the Gemara relates a similar story from a Baraisa. The sages taught there was a certain family in Jerusalem whose children were dying at around age 18. And the members of the family came and told Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai about these tragic deaths. He said to them, perhaps you are from the house of Eli. As it is stated, all the increase of your house shall die young men, which teaches that as soon as they reach full maturity, old enough to be called men, they die. Therefore, you must go out and immerse yourselves in Torah, and you will live. They went and immersed themselves in Torah, and they lived longer lives. And people would call them the family of Yochanan, after his name, as the advice that he gave them enabled them to live longer. With regard to a decree of judgment that cannot be torn up, Rav Shmuel bar Unya said that Rav said, from where is it derived that a sentence of judgment upon a community is never sealed? The Gemara expresses surprise. Is it truly not sealed? But isn't it written? For although you wash yourself with nitre and take much soap for yourself, yet your iniquity is marked before me. Jeremiah 2:22, indicating that there is no longer any atonement for iniquity of that community. So rather, one must say as follows: from where is it derived that even when a community's sentence is sealed, it may be torn up as a result of teshuvah, repentance? As it is stated, for what great nation is there that has God so close unto them as the Lord our God is whenever we call upon him? Deuteronomy 4:7. And the Gemara objects, but isn't it written in another verse, seek the Lord while he may be found, call upon him when he is near? Isaiah 55:6, implying that God is not always near and may not always answer whenever we call upon him. The Gemara answers, this contradiction is not difficult. This verse is concerning an individual who must seek God when he can be found, as he is not always equally accessible to answer those who call out to him. But that first verse is concerning a community for whom he is accessible whenever we call upon him, right? So if an entire community calls out as one to God, and they change their deeds and atone for their sins as a community and cry aloud to God for mercy and to be saved, God will listen. The Gemara asks for an individual. So when is this time that God can be said to be near? And Rav Nachman said that Rabbi Bar Avu said these are the 10 days that are between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I know we learn elsewhere that this includes also Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah. And the Gemara returns to the questions that the villagers asked Levi. And the sages in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, sent this law to Shmuel's father. A yevama, a widow who spat blood, shall remove the shoe, because it is not possible that blood came out of her mouth without any trace of saliva. For some reason, when she spit, blood came out of her mouth. Maybe she bit her tongue, she was nervous, she had a canker sore that burst, something like that. Blood came out of her mouth. But it's impossible to say that when blood came out of her mouth, that saliva didn't accompany it. So when she spit, obviously some saliva came out. There's no reason that we would disqualify this act of spitting because there was blood in it. So the Gemara raises an objection from a baraisa that states with regard to a zav, one might have thought that blood that issues from his mouth or from the opening of his genitalia should be ritually impure, like any of the secretions that issue from a zav, right? One who has had these emissions from his body that render him tameh, ritually impure, and he needs to immerse in a mikvah, have clean days, and then await nightfall. Have clean days, immerse in the mikvah, and then await nightfall, and then he'll be pure again and able to enter the temple when it's standing. So about his discharge, it says, in Leviticus 15:2, his discharge is impure. And this teaches only his white pus-like discharge and other secretions similar to it are ritually impure. But blood that issues from his mouth or from his genitalia is not impure. It is pure. And from here, one may learn that blood can issue from the mouth without saliva. For if it was, as they said, that all spittle necessarily contains saliva, even if it seems to be blood, well, then the blood in the spittle would be ritually impure due to the saliva. And the Gemara says, la kasha, not difficult. Here, where it said that blood cannot issue from the mouth without saliva, it is referring to a woman who sucks up the blood in her mouth before spitting it out, in which case there will certainly be some saliva in the mouth. There, it is referring to blood that was flowing by itself from some kind of a wound in the zav's mouth, in which case the spittle of blood might contain no saliva in it at all. It was taught in the Mishna, if a deaf-mute man underwent chalitza, or a deaf-mute woman performed chalitza, or if an adult woman performs chalitza with a male minor, an underage male, her chalitza is not valid. Now we're on 105b. And the B side is shorter than the A side. Rabbi Yehuda said that Rav said, this teaching of the Mishnah with regard to a minor, it is the statement of Rabbi Meir, who maintains that such a chalitza has significance in that it disqualifies a subsequent levirate marriage, but it is insufficient to permit the woman to marry a stranger. She will have to wait until her yavam comes of age and she can perform a valid chalitza with him. But the rabbis say the chalitza of a male minor isn't significant of anything, as she is permitted to one of the brothers in levirate marriage as one who no chalitza was performed at all. Right? So if she did it with a male who's a minor, like her brother-in-law, the only brother-in-law she has, is a minor. Let's say he's 7 years old. So she took off his shoe and spat and recited the verse. But he's a minor. So this is a meaningless chalitza. Okay, so she's not free to go marry a man in the public. She still has a levirate bond with her yavam. But this chalitza that she did, is it going to prevent her from making yibum with that boy when he becomes an adult? Or is it like when she spits and does only the spitting in front of an adult male who is her yavam, and at that point yibum is taken off the table? And the answer is no. The chalitza done with a male who's a minor has no meaning at all, and when he gets old enough, she can actually still marry him. It was taught in the Mishna, if a female minor perform chalitza, she must perform chalitza a second time once she becomes an adult, and if she does not, her first chalitza is not valid. Okay, that seems to parallel the case of the boy. Rabbi Yehuda said that Rav said, this is the statement of Rabbi Meir, that the chalitza of a female minor has no significance. Because Rabbi Meir said, man is written in the Torah portion about chalitza, and if the man does not wish to marry the woman, implying an adult man must perform chalitza. That's why it has to be a male, the male side of the chalitza has to be an adult. So therefore, according to Rabbi Meir, the female side of the chalitza also has to be an adult. But, so he says we juxtapose and compare a woman with a man, indicating that the woman must also be an adult. But the majority of the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Meir said no. The case of a male minor performing chalitza, having his shoe removed, not valid. No significance. A female minor who performs chalitza, not the same. Not parallel. The rabbis say man is written in this Torah portion, which indicates that an adult male must perform chalitza. But with respect to the woman who removes the shoe, since the term woman is not used to describe her, but rather the more general term yevama, the one awaiting yibum, is written, as the continuation of the above-mentioned verse says, to take his yevama, so she may be either an adult woman or a minor. She might either be an adult female or a minor female. So the Gemara asks, who are these rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Meir? And the Gemara answers, it is Rabbi Yosei, as it seems from this incident. As Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, were sitting outside the house of study, immersed in Torah learning. And one of them began and said, one who prays must direct his gaze downward while praying, as it is stated by God with regard to the holy temple. Says God, and my eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. God's eyes are always on the temple, meaning the divine presence rests in the land of Israel and specifically on the Temple Mount, and one must direct his gaze to the sacred land when praying. That is why every synagogue in the world, when the seats in the synagogue face the front of the room, and that is going to be toward Jerusalem. In America, where Israel is east, right, all of the synagogues face east. But if you go to a synagogue that lies east of the Holy Land, there used to be many, Jewish communities in the Arab lands east of Israel, not anymore, but there were. So in those synagogues, they would face west, so that when they were praying toward Jerusalem. And in South Africa, where there's a sizable Jewish community, they face north, so that their gaze is directed toward the Holy Land when they pray. And one of these guys who was sitting and learning, one of them said he must direct his eyes upward. So one of them said, just turn your eyes toward the Holy... No, well, one said turn your eyes down. The other one says turn your eyes up. Because it is stated, let us lift our hearts with our hands toward God in heaven. Look up with our hands up. Right, that we often think of, that's a prayer position when we're really into it and getting carried away. We're like up, right? Looking up at God with our arms and eyes up. Let us lift our hearts with our hands toward God in heaven. That's Lamentations 3:41. Good source for it. In the meantime, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei, came beside them as he was listening to these opinions, and he said to them, what are you dealing with? And they said to him, with prayer, as we are debating the proper posture for prayer. He said to them, my father, Rabbi Yosei, said as follows, one who prays must direct his eyes downward and his heart upward, in order to fulfill both of these verses. So downward means to a place on earth. So I guess downward in this context doesn't necessarily mean like just down, but it means, in America, let's say east, thinking that, something in this world, and where does, the position where sort of God's presence is most concentrated is in Jerusalem. The other opinion is, no, just turn toward heaven, not to some earthly location, but turn your eyes upward. So says Rabbi Yosei, the proper way to do it is that with your eyes, you're looking toward Jerusalem, but with your heart, you're looking up toward heaven. In the meantime, while they were talking, Rebbe, which is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, came to the house of study, and everyone quickly went to sit in their assigned places. Those who were light-footed hurried and sat in their places. Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei, due to his being very heavy, was stepping and walking slowly, as everyone was already sitting in his place on the ground and requiring him to pass over their heads in order to get to his place. Right, so he's a very prominent sage, but he's not as fast as the young students. So they end up taking all their seats, and crowding around Rebbe in the study hall. And since his Rabbi Yishmael is a prominent sage, he has to get to the front of the room near Rebbe. But to do that, he's got to sort of walk through and above heads of the people seated on the ground. So Abdon, the shortened form of the name Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's student and attendant, Abba Yudan, said to Rabbi Yishmael, "Who is that individual stepping over the heads of a sacred people?" For it appeared to him as an act of disrespect to those that were sitting that Rabbi Yishmael stepped over their heads. So Rabbi Yishmael said to him, "I am Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei." That's really good lineage, right? Rabbi Yosei, remember, Rabbi Yosei is the sage that usually, when it's Rabbi Yosei in a debate with any other sage, we take the law follows Rabbi Yosei because he was such an enormous Torah scholar, so prominent and so well versed in all of the law. So Rabbi Yishmael is the son of Rabbi Yosei. So he says, "I am Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei, and I came to learn Torah from Rebbe." Abdon said to him, "But are you fit to learn Torah from Rebbe? For it seems to me that you are showing disrespect to the others in the room just so that you can learn from Rebbe." Rabbi Yishmael said to him, "Was Moses fit to learn Torah from the mouth of the Almighty? Is anyone fit? We're all humble here. Rather, it is not necessary that the student be as dignified as the teacher. The students come to learn no matter what their stature is." So Abdon said to him, "And are you Moses?" Rabbi Yishmael said to him, "And is your teacher God?" Rav Yosef said about this part of the story that here Rebbe received his retribution for remaining silent during this discussion and not reprimanding his student for embarrassing Rabbi Yishmael. And what is this retribution? What is this punishment that Rebbe received, as it were? That when Rabbi Yishmael spoke to Abdon, he said, "Your teacher, not my teacher or our teacher," implying that at this point, he did not accept Rebbe's authority upon himself because, who wants to learn from a teacher who behaves badly in a moral manner? And Rebbe behaved badly by allowing his student, his secretary, as it were, to speak in an embarrassing and humiliating way to Rabbi Yishmael, who was just trying to get in the lecture hall and learn and just, do it as quietly as he could. But okay, he's a heavy guy. He's trying to get through a thick crowd. Abdon absolutely behaved badly, and Rebbe didn't castigate his own assistant. In the meantime, while all this was going on, a yevama, a widow, came before Rebbe, and she was a minor, close to the age of maturity, who had performed chalitzah, but it was not clear whether she had already reached the age of maturity necessary to validate her chalitza. So Rebbe said to Abdon, "Go and check to see if she has already reached maturity." After Abdon left, Rabbi Yishmael said to Rebbe, "My father, Rabbi Yosei, said like this: Man is written in the Torah portion of Khalitsa, But the woman may either be an adult woman or a female minor, as we just learned, right? So this whole story is being related to us so that we see this opinion of Rabbi Yosei that whereas a minor male cannot perform chalitza, a minor female can. And this is the part of the story that teaches that. So Rabbi Yishmael said to Rebbe, my father Rabbi Yosei said, a female minor makes a valid chalitza because the portion of the Torah only says that the man needs to be a man. The female is just referred to as a yevama. So Rebbe said to Abdon, come back. You do not need to check. As the elder, Rabbi Yosei, has already ruled that a minor female can't perform chalitza, and therefore no further examination of this one is required to see if she's an adult or not. Abdon was stepping and coming over the heads of the others in order to return to his place. Exactly the activity for which he embarrassed Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei, said to Abdon, one upon whom a holy people depends may step over the heads of a holy people. But one upon whom a holy people does not depend, as there is no longer a need for Abdon to examine the woman, how can he step over the heads of a holy people? We don't need you to get back to the front of the room. There's no emergency for you. Wait in the back. You're not as important as me, and you embarrass me for doing what you are now doing. So Rebbe said to Abdon, stand in your place and do not go any further. Meaning he heeded Rabbi Yishmael and told Abdon to stop moving. It was taught at that moment, Abdon was afflicted with tzara'as, the skin condition that you get from engaging in lashon hara, right? Wicked tongue. He was affected with tzara'as as a punishment for insulting Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei. But what was worse, and two of his sons who were recently married drowned. And his two daughters-in-law, who were minors married to those sons, made declarations of refusal and annulled their marriages. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, blessed is the merciful one who shames Abdon in this world, for this prevents him from being punished further in the world to come, as all his iniquities have been forgiven through this suffering. Now that, in passing, this additional little comment, it would seem that Abdon, that he got tzara'as for embarrassing Rabbi Yishmael, makes sense. But that Abdon's sons, were slain as a punishment to Abdon, and that his daughters-in-law, annulled the marriages as if they'd never been, so they'd severed their connection to his family. Seems like Abdon really suffered for having offended the dignity of Rabbi Yishmael, maybe too much. But then this comment from Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is it's really a very beautiful comment. It's one that we should cling to when we're really suffering in this world. Because our sages definitely believe this, that when we suffer in this world, it's a kindness. Because remember, our journey through this life, it's like nothing compared to the life of the eternal soul. So if we're going to commit terrible deeds in this world that are going to require atonement and accountability and punishment in the next world, who knows how long that could take. We also have a tradition that you go to Gehenna, the place where the soul is purified prior to going up to the world of souls, that the longest you can be there is 11 months. But to a soul that lives at, sort of different rate, as it were, who knows what those 11 months feel like? Maybe that feels like, 100 years or 1,000 years. Who knows what it feels like to the soul? So when you suffer in this world, it's like, God is giving you the chance to get all your atonement and punishment for your misdeeds out of the way in this world. So when you leave this world, you're much more, you have very little to deal with in terms of refinement and punishment, and you can go on to your reward. Rabbi Ami said, from the words of the great man, Rabbi Yosei, let us learn. A female minor performs chalitza even as a young child at age 6 or 7. Rava said, not that young. She may not perform chalitza until she reaches the age of vows, which is an 11-year-old girl, when she has enough intellectual capacity to understand the meaning of a vow. However, the Gemara concludes, and the law is, she may not perform chalitza until she develops sexually. So it's more like when she's 12, when she hits puberty. I'm almost done. If you got questions or comments, get them in. It was taught in the Mishna, if she performed chalitza before 2 or 3 people and one of them is found to be disqualified to serve as a judge, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yochanan the cobbler validated. Rabbi Yosei, so in other words, they had two or three judges, and one of them is disqualified. So there's two or three. So in the case of two, and one of them is disqualified, now there's only one judge that's a valid judge. They're saying that this chalitza is valid. Rav Yosef Bar Minyumi said that Rav Nachman said the law does not follow this pair, who would validate such a chalitza. And the Gemara asked, but didn't Rav Nachman already say this same ruling one time before? As Rav Yosef Bar Minyumi said, that Rav Nachman said, chalitza must be conducted before three people, indicating that there must be no fewer than three valid judges. The Gemara answers, both statements are necessary, for if only the first one, saying that chalitza must be before three judges, was stated, I would say this applies ab initio, but after the fact, even two is acceptable. Therefore, he teaches us that the law does not follow this pair of sages, and a chalitza before two people is invalid even after the fact. Right? Certainly, one is not valid, and even two. So if they started with three, but one was invalidated, now they only have two, the chalitza is not valid. And if it was told us only the halacha does not follow this pair, but rather the first Tana, I would say that it is valid performed before three people only after the fact, but they must require five people ab initio, in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Therefore, both of these statements were necessary. We know we only need three judges, and we need three judges, not less than three. Not more. We don't need more than three, but we can't do it with less than three. All right, that's what we've got for today. Let's check if there are any comments or questions. Nina is reporting, there was a question, but I answered it. Nothing else. Wonderful. That's what we've got for today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow for page 106, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. I'll just mention that on Thursday, and we'll put an announcement on the Facebook page, on Thursday there won't be class because I have a Maccabeah games obligation. As you know, I've told you before, I'm going to be coaching the Masters and Grandmasters golf teams in the Maccabeah Games in Israel in July. That's going to be a 2-week trip, and there's some obligations leading up to that. One of them is this Thursday. While I'm in Israel for those 2 weeks, I'm still figuring out what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to be able to teach from there or not. It's not that I can't get online in Israel. Obviously, I could. But there's going to be so much to do with regards to my obligations as coach and being part of the U.S. delegation at the Maccabeah Games that I'm just not sure what's going to be possible. But I'll say more about that as we get closer to that trip. That's it. And with God's help, see you tomorrow.